Hi there people, welcome to this video. Today I'll be doing the Curse of the Onibaba mission on Nightmare difficulty and solo. This is to help you that is having a bit of a difficulty or just to give some tips. By doing this on Nightmare and solo, you can apply basically any tip to the to the other difficulties. It's just not going to be so tough. It's a great way to farm 110 key year, so I recommend it if you're leveling up a class. The general modifier for this mission is wildfire, so enemies when they die, they will leave a small area of fire. And on this first part, the modifier is Oni dogs. In the whole mission, you will see Oni dogs and bears, so pay attention to that. Here in the beginning, in this first area before the camp, there's usually 6 enemies. As you can see, I'm using the bow to kill them all because as a hunter, I cannot kill them silently by assassinating them. So I use the executioner technique to give me 50% more headshot damage, so I can one-shot enemies more reliably. This is something very important for this mission and for Nightmare in general. You need to know how much damage you deal, and you need to know what enemies you can one-shot. As a quick reference, I believe all classes are able to assassinate the lowest level Mongol, you know, the one with a simple tunic. You can assassinate them with any class, without any stealth attack damage. But for other enemies, you also need to know how much damage you can deal, so you can kill them even if they are inside the aura of a disciple, for example. It's also very important for Oni dogs, and in this mission there are bears, which are very annoying and can spot you from a pretty decent range, so watch out for that. I know I can one-shot dogs with a headshot. This way I can plan what I'm going to do before the encounter. As a personal preference, I usually like to have very short encounters. So I'll take some time planning ahead, so I do it the fastest I can. Because the longer you stay in combat, the more likely you are to be attacked and die. I also use the stagger arrows as the special skill for the hunter class. I like it quite a bit. It's very effective when you're dealing with groups, and it's also very effective when you're dealing with big enemies. So it also deals quite a bit of damage, and I believe it inflicts burning, so that's pretty good. The hunter also has a technique that gives it 25% status effect damage, which is pretty good. I have in my katana the Way of the Flame that is very good for enemies that block, for example shield enemies. Some spearmen are also a bit annoying, so you can use the Way of the Flame to bypass their guard completely. Not only that, the status effect damage from our technique also helps it a bit. The scroll in this first part is in a burnt building near the monk. I recommend you pick it up before you talk to the monk, because the monk is going to... because you can't do it while you're in a conversation. So pick the scroll up, talk to the monk, replenish your ammo, which is again very important. Try to always be topped off on ammo and be sure to use it very well. In this mission, I don't use all my resources. I don't use the kunai very often. and neither I do use the smoke bomb very often. But they are very good and you should definitely use it. I'm trying to do not really a tougher kind of mission, but I'm trying to not use as much resources just to show that you can do it without having everything maxed out, and you don't need to be great at the game to finish Nightmare. Just keep in mind that if you're doing it with someone else and it's not a friend, it's just random matchmaking, they most likely will be trying to speedrun the mission, so you should be mindful of that. It's also great to do it with someone else because you get more rewards. You can get the Oni treasure and you can also do Gyozen's Curse, which in my opinion in this particular mission is not too bad. I think less health is the better modifier. This second part is... there's not much trick to it. I like to go to the leftmost enemy group first because I think if I mess up there are lesser enemies that will aggro, so I prefer to do that. I also shoot the disciple in the middle just because it's an easy shot. And it's helpful if I mess up and the reinforcements come. In this second part, the modifier is bears, so be prepared to face some bears. There are usually 2, I believe, in this second part. On the first part, there are also 2 on the camp. So try to identify where they are and either deal with them first or leave them as the last thing to deal with. Usually you can't really run from the bears because they will pursue you. I use fire arrows to help deal more damage, and the stagger arrows don't work on the bears, so just try to get a direct hit. Or you can also use the explosive fire arrow, which is the other option. These are all viable options. I'm just... this is just my personal preference. And this is a very important thing too. Be sure your loadout is matching your playstyle, because often things go wrong, and when they go wrong you need to know what you have and what can you do so you don't lose it. The nightmare missions are often quite tough because you don't have second chances. If you die, you just have to restart. So minimizing your deaths and minimizing the times you're downed by just resetting aggro or just running away can be a time saver, and it will avoid losing the whole run. In the second part, the possible scroll location is near the rocks on the rightmost side. It's a weird spot, but you can definitely find it. If it's not on the first position, it's probably on this position, or there are 2 others in the third part. In nightmare missions, it's always the same, but if you're doing it on gold difficulty, for example, the position of the scroll can vary. On the third part, do not forget, if you're with a partner, to pick up Gyozen's Curse. The rewards are very nice. On the third part, the modifier is the purple Oni, so be prepared to face very tanky enemies. This is another great place to show how important it is to know how much damage you deal. Before I take on the disciple, I take down some enemies, and I can only take them down because I know I can one-shot them. If you can't one-shot them, go straight for the disciple. As the hunter, I prefer to use more my bow. I think it's more interesting in terms of what the class represents. So I like to stay on top of the building and snipe enemies from there. It's interesting to note that I fire a fire arrow at the disciple. You could see in the second part that I can kill an enemy with a single fire arrow. Now, in this part, I don't kill it with a single fire arrow, and the reason is because I didn't pull the bow all the way. So if you're using the longbow, try to get used to it and how long it takes to pull the string. I also use a stagger arrow on the Oni so I can shoot fire arrows without being seen. Just pay attention because the stagger doesn't last too long. So I believe I was only able to fire 2 fully drawn arrows. So coordinate with your teammate or just be prepared to shoot and hide. It's very important to remember that in this third part you have hostages, and dealing with the enemies while you have a hostage can be very complicated. So pay attention and don't let the enemies see you, because once they see you they will flood to the hostage and you'll have to deal with a lot of enemies in close proximity. So it's best that you avoid this situation altogether and just do things smoothly. Remember, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So don't rush things and try to be in the best situation possible. In this first hostage, I know I prefer to go forward, but I know some people like to go to the left first. But in this house specifically, there are usually 2 people guarding the hostage. And these 2 people can be assassinated if you have enough damage. You can assassinate the first one through the shoji, the rice paper door, and the second one won't notice. So you can either do that and shoot an arrow at the second one, or you can just shoot arrows at both if you don't have enough assassination damage. In this third part, one of the possible positions is in this house, but on top. The scroll glows, so you can see if it's there and you don't need to go up the ladder. This second group of enemies is probably the toughest of all of them, at least personally, because you have a lot of enemies close together. The Oni dog, that is the position that the Oni dog is in, is usually occupied by a sleeping enemy. So this brings to a very good tip. If in any mission you find a sleeping enemy, try to assassinate them. It doesn't matter how much assassination damage you have, as long as they're sleeping, it's going to be a one-shot kill. Even the purple Oni or other very tanky enemies die to a single hit when they're sleeping. So you can use that to your advantage. Just don't wake them up. It's very helpful on nightmare missions because you don't really want to deal with those tanky enemies that deal a lot of damage. That can cost you the run, and it's sometimes way too risky.
捕虜だけではこの七から逃れるのは難しい。
I try to eliminate the enemies silently, but I end up alerting a few of them. This is a bit problematic, as I'm not personally very good at melee combat, and my hunter is mostly geared towards ranged combat. Though actually I don't have very good gear in my hunter, so it's not geared for anything. The second possible location for the scroll is near this second group of enemies on the other house where the hostage is not in. You can, if it was not on any of the positions that I mentioned before, it's probably here. These are the 4 positions that the scroll can be in, so if you don't find it in one of them, it's probably in one of the other positions. Now to the third group of enemies. This has an actually very interesting case, because you'll see 2 normal dogs, and in all of the times I tried this mission, I've never seen any other enemy occupy that position, because it's always dogs, like normal dogs. I find it very curious. And this is another very interesting tip. Try to remember the enemy positions, because the enemies themselves will change, but their positions will not. So usually there will always be enemies in certain positions. The enemy itself, though, may change. So you can use that as information for enemy pathing, for example, and you know exactly which enemies you need to take down first, or which enemies you can wait. I try to get a better angle on the Disciple and the Oni. I again use the stagger arrow to stagger the Oni and fire 2 shots. It's a very good arrow, I like it a lot. I know I can assassinate the commander if I fire a fully drawn fire arrow at his head. So I do that and I assassinate him while the Oni is looking the other way. And then I can quickly assassinate the Oni. It's very good to know the enemy behavior, because when they're looking for you, they will do exactly that. They'll move, and then they will stop and look around at that position. You can use that brief second to take an enemy down without them noticing. It's also very important to note, mostly for the hunter, but it's also important for the other classes, that aiming and firing in this game is a bit odd, because, for example, if you're looking directly, because if you're in front of a wall and your reticle is on target, It's the arrow can actually go through the wall, or I can't really explain it, but basically if you have the angle right, you can shoot at enemies without being seen, just by using this mechanic. The Oni treasure is also in this third part. It's near the docks, and the enemies that come in here are and the enemies that defend it are usually a single spear Oni and a couple of Oni dogs. So keep that in mind when you're going to get it. And that's basically it. It's not a tough mission, but it really requires some planning because of the disciples and the bears specifically in this one. If you would like to see me doing this mission with the assassin, I already have another video on my channel. The modifiers are a bit different, but the idea is basically the same. So if you'd like to see that, you can check it out. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I usually answer all the questions. I usually answer all the comments if I'm notified of them, that is. And if you'd prefer a written version, you can see that on Reddit. Thank you very much. See you all next time.